recording. And I'm gonna introduce Meghan and get us started then. So the first thing I actually want to do is to thank my co-conspirator and collaborator, Darnisha Slade. This exhibit and all of the events that surround it are a collaboration between the Department of Visual and Performing Arts and the Pavlis Honors College, and DAR has been working nonstop putting together a global and community engagement conference that Meghan was just the keynote speaker at. And so we're just super excited to have Meghan here. It's just been really lovely to listen to more about your work and to learn and to have you interact with folks on campus. So before we start, I want to remind folks that I'm in the gallery right now, but there are 5 places on campus that there are exhibits, and at each of those locations there is a map that can get you to others. And those, just, you know, so you have this information, those places are the Rosé Gallery, Walker 3rd floor, the Pavlis Honors College, the campus library, and the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. And so we just really hope that you can walk around and see the different exhibits and maybe even chat with some people who are hosting them, because we chose locations so that people would be welcome to do that in those places. As Meghan's talking, you may have questions. That would be wonderful. Just type them in the chat box, and once she's done presenting, I will read them out and she can answer them. So to introduce our guest, oh, we've got another person coming, wonderful. Welcome, Yuli. Meghan Kirwood is a photographer who researches the ways in which landscape imagery can inform and advance public conversations around land use, infrastructure, and values towards the natural environment. She earned a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the Rhode Island School of Design and Photography, an MFA in Studio Art at Tulane University, and a PhD at the University of Florida. She currently works as an assistant professor of visual arts at the Sam Fox School of Visual Arts and Design at Washington University in St. Louis, where she serves as the area head in photography. Kirkwood's work has been exhibited internationally at venues including the Blue Sky Gallery in Portland, Oregon, Filter Space in Chicago, Illinois, the Bangkok Art and Culture Center in Thailand, Art Space Durban in South Africa, and the Midwest Center for Photography in Wichita, Kansas. Her photographs are held in several private and public collections, including the Rhode Island School of Design Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, and the University of Florida Genetics Institute. Her work has been featured in publications such as Lens Scratch, Don't Take Pictures, and the Oxford American. In tandem with her studio practice, Kirkwood also researches in the fields of African art and the history of photography. When not photographing or traveling, Kirkwood trains for and competes in marathons. She is with us today with support from Michigan Tech's Visiting Professor Program, which is funded by a grant to the Office of the Provost from the State of Michigan's King Chavez Parks Initiative. Please join me in welcoming Meghan Kirwood. Okay.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that intro, Lisa. It's really great to be here, and it's really fun to see you with a background of the gallery. It's really exciting. So I'm really excited about that, and I hope that everybody has a chance to go and see the work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit today about the projects that are up, and about kind of how it fits in the context of my current practice. Okay, so we'll just get this going here. All right, just okay. Okay, all right, looks good. Everyone can see my screen? Okay, awesome. All right. All right, so I wanted to just start out and yeah, just tell you a little bit more about myself and kind of how I got started on some of the I work as a photographer and as the work in the work that's on view in the gallery. So I'm originally from New Hampshire, and this is a time of year where I'm very jealous of places that experience beautiful falls like I had the chance to grow up in, and like you guys are all experiencing right now in the UP. So growing up in New Hampshire was a really important time for me in terms of making me a photographer and making me really interested in landscape specifically. And now, as Lisa said, I currently work as a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and where I'm teaching photography. And most of the work that I'm doing here now relates to, or most of the work that I'm doing with students is related to doing aerial imaging. So this was a picture that we took together with some students in one of our labs. And as Lisa also mentioned, a lot of my non-photographic time I spend doing art historical research, and specifically looking into the history of South African photography. And that's been a huge influence for me, perhaps more than anything that I learned about American photography when I was in art school and studying in university. And South Africa is just a really interesting, very dynamic place for photography. It's got a very long history with the media, and it's something that a lot of artists use to engage with various social issues that are that continue to reverberate even after the ending of apartheid in 1994. So some of the most important, like I say, influences for me and the work that I do come from South Africa. So just to kind of give you one example, many of you might be familiar with this artist, Ernest Cole, who was a photographer that was working kind of throughout the country, but primarily in Johannesburg in the 1950s and 1960s. And he put together a book called The House of Bondage. And this book was really one of the first books that ever gave kind of a holistic view of what it was like to be a Black person in South Africa under apartheid. So his goal was something that we would describe as like a humanistic documentary. Like, he didn't want to show like people suffering per se, but he really wanted to kind of show like the small things that would make life difficult for Black South Africans. And so he had all these ways of photographing, some very clandestine. So he got arrested a couple times and was able to sneak a camera in. Other times he was just kind of another person in the crowd. And he really tried to represent all sorts of people and from different walks of life. And he was a very influential photographer in South Africa, and was an important mentor through his work through a number of artists who were very active in the 1970s and 80s doing social documentary work. So artists such as Cedric Nunn, and then Santu Mofokeng. And again, some of these names might be familiar to some of you, but these were some of the first photographers that I ever really studied in any depth. And they, for me, were really important because they made me think that the medium of photography could do something, could contribute to society and social dialogue, and help change the way people saw issues through a much more kind of a nuanced, in-depth way. So most of the work that I've been doing in my career, both in school and professionally, has been some form of kind of long-term project, and long-term projects that concentrate on some aspect of the documentary question. So just to kind of give you an example of that, the one project that I've been working on for about 10 years is a documentary of a small area in Chaminade, Louisiana, that was really negatively impacted from the 2005 Hurricane Katrina. And what I wanted to do with this, or what I started to do with this project, was just to photograph this one neighborhood that had a really high density of rental units. And these rental units, were populated by people who were working in New Orleans, but many of whom didn't really have didn't have a way necessarily to take part in any of the social programs that were helping people rebuild, to replace their things, to to kind of start their lives over in the community. So I got interested in these places that just kind of got left, and to think about the people that had been there. So so this project kind of started out just doing various documentary images of what had been left behind, and then as things got cleaned up over the years, what did that space look like? Like, kind of who was, somebody was still mowing it and taking care of it. Things were growing back in different places, but it wasn't, it wasn't really something you could say was rehabilitated. So it was just interesting to me to think about a very broad issue, which was the aftermath of one of the worst hurricanes the U.S. has ever experienced, and to think about how it kind of reverberated out and has all these ripples that continue to influence spaces and how people interact with them, even 10 years, 15 years now, then after the storm. And the other big kind of focus of my work right now, as Lisa mentioned, is a focus on infrastructure. I get really interested in infrastructure just because it's this thing that is almost like so boring that people sort of don't always pay attention to it, and the enormous impact it has on people's lives. For the past, before I moved to St. Louis, I was living in Fargo, North Dakota, and that was an area of the country that was very, very impacted by an oil boom and by developments in hydraulic fracturing, and specifically horizontal drilling technology, and the construction of major new pipelines and other infrastructure to transport the oil resources that were suddenly accessible to a broader audience, or excuse me, to a broader set of refineries and to consumers. And so through this work that I was doing in the oil region in North Dakota, I got very interested in just how the rapid construction of new energy plants, of like new housing settlements, and then of course the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota specifically, but then also in the three other states that it crosses. I just got very interested in kind of how all these pieces fit together, and how you could have something so big like this in the middle of the country that so few people would ever really interact with, directly, but who would have some kind of connection to through the energy that we all use. And so so I decided that I was going to do a long-term documentary project about this pipeline, and specifically the landscapes that surround it and that are impacted by it. And so so over the course of 4 years, I've been driving sections of the pipeline and trying to just focus on what the landscapes look like, what the communities surrounding it look like, and also kind of what the lingering effects are. So again, that's the focus through a number of projects that I'm doing, is to kind of think about maybe what are the things that long after these things fade from headlines continue to reverberate for people that live in these in a given landscape. So so I've been using some aerial imaging just to find places where the pipeline is still shaping the land, even 4 years after it's put in. And these images for me are important because, again, they kind of show this little shadow of something that we don't even see anymore, but that continues to have an impact on on the farmers and the land that they're growing in. And then so my look at infrastructure is something that's still ongoing, and the most recent work that I'm doing is related to orphan wells, and a huge number of just like well paths and oil heads and old oil infrastructure that gets put and constructed, and after a company will go bankrupt or something happens to them, that they just get to, that gets just left behind. So I've been looking at specifically at this phenomena in northwestern Louisiana, and finding some of these wells that no longer are being used, but are still, again, continuing to shape the land and the landscape around them. So this has been this is a new project that I'm working on, but one that I hope to kind of keep thinking about, and how it relates to broader questions that we're talking about now in terms of land use, climate change, and human shaped landscapes in general. So I'm just kind of sharing a couple of these projects to kind of give you a sense of things that I'm doing, and also to kind of set up maybe a little bit of contrast for the work that that's in the gallery. But that's also a project that's very, very near and dear to my heart, about Mongolia, and about specifically the capital city. This is a project, for those of you who haven't had a chance to see the gallery or read a lot about it, where I started photographing there in 2007, and returned there in 2017 to do kind of a follow-up and a second conversation with a set of images that I took a decade earlier. And the goal of the project was really to be using street photography and documentary photography to just ask kind of some very simple questions about what did a modern city in Mongolia look like. For those of you who don't know very much about Mongolia, that was certainly me before I had it, before I traveled there and really started to research the space. It's a really interesting country. It's a very, very small, it's got a very small population in a very large land area. And most people who live in Mongolia are living in the capital city, and those who are not are primarily living outside of the capital city, throughout the country, in very rural areas, primarily living a nomadic lifestyle. Mongolia went through a number of really important and very impactful changes in the early 90s, when it transitioned from being a communist country that was part of the USSR, and into a democratic government and a market economy. And the project that I designed and kind of set up to do was one that I did kind of with a little bit of a nod to, but also greatly influenced by the project The Americans, that was completed by Robert Frank in the late 1950s. For those of you who don't know who Robert Frank is, Robert Frank's still alive. He's a documentary photographer and filmmaker, and he's really best known for this work, The Americans, which is a project that he did over 2 years with the support of the Guggenheim Fellowship. And what he did was to travel the US and photograph between 1955 and 1957 over a 10,000-mile road trip in a Ford business coupe. And during that time, he took about 20,000 pictures, which he sequenced down into 83 pictures that he kept in this book. And what's so interesting to me about this project is that he started it out with just kind of a very simple question. He was an immigrant to the U.S. He was a naturalized citizen, but he grew up in Switzerland. And one of the big goals that he had with this this project, was just to see what the country looked like, and specifically what it looked like to someone who was a naturalized citizen who belonged in the country, but also was something of a foreigner because he had grown up somewhere else. And so it was this very, very extensive project, and this diagram here just kind of maps out some of the routes that he took. And the set of images that he came up with, that he edited down into the 83, are really pretty moving and very, very layered. And this is a body of work that a lot of people, or documentary photographers and photography students in the US, study to a pretty close degree, just because of all of the painstaking work that went into choosing the images that, from these 20,000 down to 83, studying how Robert Frank, developed themes within the work, and brought together this really diverse body of images from across the country to talk about a very broad subject, which was the American population. When he came out with this book, it actually he had to publish it first overseas because some people didn't think it was the most flattering picture of the U.S. But for him, for him, he felt it was a very honest portrayal of kind of the things that he was seeing throughout the country. And so I'll just show you some pictures from this, but this is a book that he constructed in 4 sections, and each one of the sections begins with a picture of the American flag. And each section has this, different rhythm to it. So it's this interplay between motion and stasis, between presence and absence of people, of observers and those who are being observed. And he really tried very hard to explore all sections of the American people. So, people of different races, military and civilian, and people living in urban areas, rural areas, and various places that people would gather, in drugstores and diners and city streets and funerals, and that's one of the reasons that the book has really lasted for so long and continued to influence so many generations of photographers after its publications. It's just that it's it managed to be this project that was about such a big topic that it could never fully be contained in a single book of photographs, but that could in its selection, in its editing, come to touch on so many different themes. But yeah, so this was a book that I first kind of encountered very early on in school, and it was just a really interesting and a very very important set of images for for me to study as a photographer and to think about everything that it had meant for American photography, for documentary photography, and about what it showed as far as kind of the potential of the medium. So I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of that. So obviously, in the short time that I was in Mongolia, I wasn't going to be able to do anything on the scale of what Robert Frank did in his work. But what I really admired again in Frank's work was this, that he kind of started out again just with this really honest question, which is just to kind of say, he wanted to see what the country looked like from the perspective that he brought to it. And at the same time, he felt a very serious and social obligation to be portraying the country in a way that felt real and representative. So he never confined himself to just one set of things that he was going to represent, and really tried to be attentive to all the different ways that society was animated throughout the country. And so that was again something that I wanted to do when I was working in Mongolia. And so the project that I ended up doing, really kind of started out with just that question. It was just to see what the city looks like and what it meant to be a modern city in Mongolia. Mongolia is a very, very beautiful country, and many people who have had the fortune to travel there have had the chance to go out and see things like the Gobi Desert, the incredible grasslands, the beautiful expanses of land that just really, really change you when you see them. But many people also only know Mongolia for those things, for those incredible vistas and landscapes and the wildlife community, some really, really strong traditions in falconry, and very, very rich traditions from the country that that are traditional dress and what have you, things that are very, very, very central to Mongolian culture. But very few people know a lot about the main city, and just what an incredible and dynamic place that it is. And given all of the changes that Mongolia has gone through in recent decades because of the transitions from being a communist country to being one that's operating as part of the global economy, there's been a lot of growing pains that have come with that, but also a lot of energy and a lot of drive and innovation and just energy. Other things that that make Mongolia and Ulaanbaatar a really, really incredible place are just the population itself. Mongolia, the 36% of Mongolians are under the age of 18, and it's just a very young and vibrant city, and that's driven by this energy, this youthful energy of such a huge population under the age of 18. So what I was interested in, again, was just to start out and kind of challenge myself to be to experience the city and the space of the city by walking throughout in it, and trying to observe just what was happening in front of me and what was happening in front of what was starting to change and morph just right in front of my own eyes. So over a period of weeks while I was in Mongolia the first time in 2007, I would just spend the entire day just walking and visiting different parts of the city, traveling throughout different neighborhoods, spending time in the main thoroughfares where a lot of people would kind of come together for recreation, just observing people moving around me, observing things that were happening. And again, the aim at the time was just to take pictures of everything and to not really try to edit out or try to control or really focus on building a narrative from what I was seeing. I wanted to again kind of take this nod from Robert Franken and really think about just getting being witness to all of these things that were happening, and to think at a later time a little bit more about how maybe all these pieces fit together. So it was a pretty big project at the time, and I didn't totally know what it was that I would do with it, or what the final result would be. But it was interesting to get back to the U.S. after working in Mongolia for that initial 6-week period, and to just kind of sort through and see the kinds of things that were coming to the fore. Different examples of tradition meeting modern day performances and settings. All of the different ways technologies kind of featured into the things that I was photographing, but the ways that people were moving throughout the city, just the traffic and the people that were they're moving in and out of it. I did spend some time in the countryside the first time that I was in Mongolia. I mean, not as much as I was in the main capital city, but that was an opportunity too, just to see and get a sense of what some of the communities were, that were outside of this main thoroughfare looks like, and what their lives were like too. So after I had kind of worked on this, I knew I really wanted to go back into, because so much of what I'd been seeing in Mongolia the first trip there was just like how much stuff was changing, and it felt like the entire city was a construction site, and there was just stuff happening everywhere. And I really wanted to be able to go back and see how the city was growing and to see how things were changing. A lot of the city was growing in an informal way at the time in 2007, and that's something that's continuing today as a result of kind of this, again, this transition from a communist system to a market economy. That resulted in a lot more migration to the city and a very, very rapid growth in neighborhoods, and a lot of need for development of infrastructure and things that that wasn't necessarily able to keep pace with the ways that people were, the rate at which people were moving into the city. So I was interested just to see what, how some of those growing pains associated with the city had developed and moved on, and that was a really important thing to me and again, thinking about coming back to visit again in 2017. So in 2017, I went back for about the same period of time, and really just tried to do more or less the same thing, to just kind of spend the entire time walking throughout the city, speaking to people when I was able to. Most of the time I was by myself, so I wasn't working with a translator or working with a specific contact, but But again, really trying to use the street photography model where you're photographing things that are coming in front of you, and really trying to think about the interaction between people and the spaces that they're in. You're never really trying to think too much, again, about building a story or a narrative or imposing a perspective that you have about what you're seeing, as much as you are just trying to take stock of what's happening. So I did that, and that was a, again, a really big learning experience for me in terms of thinking about how the city had changed, how the city had grown, how I had changed and grown in that year, and just what it was like to be in the space again, and to see and experience such an incredible and vibrant environment and space. But I also wanted to push the project a little bit more. So one of the things, as I'm saying, with the street photography and those types of projects, is that street photography is really all about photographing the streets and the people that are there and the things that are happening, but never really with an eye to elevating a single individual or to elevating a specific story or person. And you're also photographing in a way that is very fast-paced, and that is, kind of like you see, you're designed to see street photography projects in large numbers of images, so that you kind of get a sense of the rhythm of a place, of the kind of the interplay between one scene and the other. And so I wanted to have a chance to add to that with a little bit more of a focus and depth on the people that I was meeting there. And so what I did, just to kind of add and build onto the project, was to set up some photo portrait studios, or informal portrait studios, in some of the main thoroughfares in the capital city. And so how this worked was that I had a contact who was working as a translator for me, and we were meeting people in the square and talking, and I would talk to them a little bit about the work I was doing and see if they'd be willing to have their portrait taken. And if they were, then we'd take some portraits, and then I would share the images with them, and they would give me feedback, and we'd have a collaboration of sorts in creating this portrait. And I also had a Polaroid camera there, so I could take some pictures of the people that I was photographing and give it to them right then and there. And then also I was putting them up on a Facebook event so that they could access the digital files if they wanted them as well. And that was a really different way to be working, kind of just stationary, in a much more like direct engagement with the people that I was photographing in the street photography setting. And what I wanted to do with the studio lighting in these spaces was, again, just to focus on individuals and to really kind of pick people more out from the crowd and give a chance for viewers to, kind of to see people, not in this just black and white format, but in something that felt very present and real. An advantage of doing black and white photography for things like a street photography project is that, again, it lets you kind of create this, rely a little bit more on form and content to create a rhythm and a pattern and a set of themes between a large number of images. And it's more easy to do that in terms than with color photography. But the downside is that, black and white photography has very specific connotations of age, of things that are more nostalgic or from a different era, or from they don't read kind of the crisp present in the way that big color images do. So that was something that I wanted to be able to integrate a little bit more of that feeling into the series, and so these portraits were a way to do that. And if you're able to see these in the gallery, they're much bigger than the small black and white works. The small black and white works are all printed in the darkroom, so they're necessarily a little bit smaller than they would be if they were digital prints. But the portraits are designed to be bigger and to have just a different pace to them. So something that's a little slower and a little bit more contemplative, and that are designed to kind of bring the viewer in, and just to have a kind of a momentary encounter between the viewer and these people that are that are living halfway across the world. So that's a big feature of the second half of this project, and one that that I felt very lucky to have been able to do while I was in there. So with that, I'm going to end and answer any questions that anybody might have.
Megan, thank you so much. I just keep, every time I listen to you talk and see your images, I find another one that I'm like, oh, and I want to talk about that one. Oh, I want to talk about that one, because I've just been able to see more things over the past couple of lectures you've given. I'm going to remind folks that we're going to use the chat for questions. So, so if you have a question for Megan, just pop it in the chat, and I'll read that out to her, and we can have a conversation that way. And while we're waiting for people to jump in, I'm actually going to ask you to, something that keeps coming up for me is one of the first times that I met you, which now is years and years ago. I remember you explaining how you took images of the prairie, and what you really liked about taking images of the prairie and what you were trying to do, because you said that many of the things that were valuable were things that we couldn't see. Those things were underground. And I just wonder how that perspective, or if that perspective influences how you construct projects like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, because it's like, yeah, right. So in some ways, like the actual like editing of images and preparing them and like sequencing and everything is this like this. It's this effort to chase this experience that you had in a moment, right? So experiencing the city and like trying to keep track of everything that was happening there, and just do justice to this, to this energy and this vibrancy that I was feeling. That isn't something I would, even through film, I don't think I would be successful in really truly replicating. But I want to, and I want to feel like I can, try through these series of images that, that are representative of these little flashes in time, to see if like by kind of splicing things together and highlighting like little bits of charged moments, like am I able to do, to create something that is analogous to that feeling of an energy that's animating a place. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, like that's with prairies, like that's never stopped fascinating me, of just that you can have these whole ecological systems that are, the things that make them what they are things that you just like can't see, but you're very much like witnessing in front of you at the same time. And so it's this odd challenge, because photography is theoretically all about like visualizing the things that you're seeing and representing things in spaces, but we're like never really able to do it, but we can kind of, through editing and through our sequencing and presentations, like create something that's different that tries to get at that. And it's just this like elusive challenge that never stops being interesting to me. I don't know what it's like for artists in other mediums to kind of chase that, but I suspect that we're all kind of doing that in some way.
Thank you, that's interesting. We have a question from Yulia. She says, hi, why did you choose Mongolia as opposed to other newly developing countries?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went to Mongolia because I was at first going to work on another project, and that was with a friend that I knew from art school, who she worked at a restaurant in Michigan that was a Mongolian barbecue, and like it was a chain that had started in Michigan that had a branch in Mongolia, and this restaurant, like, so this was after we both graduated, and she was like observing to the owners that every picture they had of Mongolia was just like a picture of either like a camel or a falcon, and like there weren't any pictures of the people, and she just thought that like that wasn't okay. And so we talked about this a bunch of times. Anyway, so long story short, we made a proposal to the owners that we would like to go to Mongolia as part of like an annual exchange that they would usually do between restaurant employees, and we wanted to do kind of a documentary that was both about like the restaurant and the people that were working there, and then also like about just about the country as a whole. So it was really through her that I first got like connected to that. So I have everything to owe to her for that. But yeah, but it was part of another sort of documentary project, and she was working to do a lot of stuff in film too, so I was her assistant for that. So yeah.
Thank you. Other questions for Megan? Ooh, I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. So that happens sometimes in the gallery. So this is going to be weird, but I'm going to move us to a different location. How we doing? Is that better? Okay. Well, now we got a different view. Okay. Great. I'm getting messages from people. Oh, it's Dar. Okay, I'm fine. Great. Thank you, Dar. Thank you for saying that. Wonderful. Megan, could you talk a little bit about, whenever I read what you've written about the show, there's notes about like the IMF thinking that capitalism would be ideal for Mongolia, or the rapid changes that happened that were not necessarily driven by the culture itself, that were influenced by other things. And I guess I'd like to hear more about that story and how, I know when you look at these, you think of yourself more as an observer, but how your understanding of that story plays into these photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, right. It's a really interesting story, and one that that I know a little bit about, and was really, really important to me as I thought about how to put together this series. But that is but that's very rich in this narrative. Yeah, in the transition from kind of a communist system to a market economy, there was a lot of the thing is that happened very, very rapidly over, almost like seemingly overnight in Mongolia. And the challenge for doing that in a place like Mongolia is that so much of the population at that time there wasn't really the economic and social infrastructure to accommodate such a rapid change. So just to kind of give you an example, for the populations in the countryside that that had been supported through various kind of communist systems, schools that were run by the government, that were boarding schools, so that nomadic families could send their children to go and to study at, and while they were continuing to farm with the animals, there was a lot of systems in place to help farmers get their animals to market, and to support farmers to have a certain capacity of animals. And so once those things got taken away, there was a huge drive for people to be to be a kind of their own distributors, and to manage whole parts of the agricultural economy that they hadn't managed before. And so that meant that there was what that's resulted in, just to kind of give you another example, is there's just a huge overgrazing issue in Mongolia, and a lot of people that really aren't able to make enough money as a nomadic farmer to be able to sustain the costs that they have to do that work and to support their families. So that's resulted in, kind of in this huge migration to the city, and this explosion of informal settlements outside of the city, which Mongolia has I don't know if it's the distinction, but it's the coldest capital city in the world. It's very high. It's the average. I don't know the height of the elevation of the capital city, but the average elevation of the entire country is about the height of Denver. So it's about 5,200 feet. So it gets very, very cold there, and for a lot of people, they're burning coal. And so when you have that combined with temperature inversions and what have you, you have a really big air pollution populace. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit on a tangent here, but it's just there was all these examples of sort of ways that a market system, which was designed to help a lot of people, just develop and sustain better lives, just really didn't have this immediate fit, particularly for rural populations. But that was a really big part of the population at the time. And so do that, and then also just to enter into the global economy. You know, Mongolia really tried to do everything that the IMF and the World Bank was telling them to do, and it just didn't. It wasn't a panacea or like a. It created a lot of problems at the same time as it solved a lot of things. And so for a lot of people in Mongolia, you know, they didn't necessarily like communism, but there were aspects of how things had been run that meant that had a lot of stability in them, and they found some value in that. So it was interesting for me to think about that, because it wasn't, you know, it's not really the narrative that you get about communism and you know, communist states. Is like, you know, you think of like the entrance into the global economy as meaning more wealth for a population, and in Mongolia, you know, it's getting to be that way, but there's been a lot of cost to that. And so I wanted to, in this series, you know, that was really important for me to think about, both when I was seeing things that, you know, were representative of poverty that had come about as a result of these changes, you know, is to understand that in a context, right? Like if there's things, you know, things that don't look necessarily like they, yeah, I don't know, it's just like everything, you want to be able to understand it in terms of its history. It's not just, things didn't get to be a certain way just because, you know, like they're part of a bigger story. So trying to understand that in the context of like, why was the city growing so fast, and why was it growing, and why did it have such a problem with air pollution in a country that is as big as Mongolia and that is so full of open landscapes? Like there had to be a reason for some of that. So that learning a little bit more about that process and just how Mongolia has been trying to, you know, kind of balance between meeting the needs of its citizens and also, you know, making sure that they have the resources to have rich economic lives has been a really specific challenge for them.
Thank you. Megan, we have a question from Dar. Dar would like to know what's next for you and Mongolia. What's your next idea for a project?
Oh, well, I want to go back there. Maybe like 2027. Just to see it again, but like it's, yeah, so I don't know. There's a lot of things I kind of still have to think about what I want to do with this work, but yeah, most of the work I'm doing right now is kind of related to climate change and infrastructure. So that's taking up a lot of fun time. So the Orphan Well project is something that I hope will be it's one of those things where I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm doing that project. I'm sorry, it's a topic to talk about, but it's really interesting, and it's. I guess it's kind of connecting me to rural communities and like the ways that rural spaces are impacted by energy and infrastructure development. There's a story about that in Mongolia too, given you know, just it has incredible mineral resources in Mongolia, and that's employing a larger number of Mongolians, and is a really big conduit to how they're connecting to the global economy. But it's something that happens pretty far away from the capital city and involves a much smaller sector of the population.
All right, we have maybe just time for one more question if anyone has one. I'll just give us a moment to see if anyone wants to add anything into the chat. Dar asks, I noticed that many of the people in the images weren't smiling. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think that was just a product of me catching them at like a thought moment, or they're like seeing someone just walking around with a camera and wondering who they are and what they're doing. The Mongolian people are incredibly generous. Like these are, that's something I didn't touch upon in the talk. I really should have. They're some of the like nicest, kindest people I've ever met in terms of their willingness to help strangers and help each other out, and just the number of people that I just meet randomly, you know, through doing this work that would, you know, want to have me over and share and talk about their lives and learn about where I was coming from. It was truly incredible. So yeah, they're very friendly people, and so I should have more people that are smiling, but I think I caught them in moments of confusion.
Wow. Well, Megan, I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been really wonderful. Actually, I want to ask before we sign off, Dar, do you have, because the D80 conference, the Global Engagement Conference is still going on, do you have any events you want to make sure people know about happening in the coming month, or
No, everything else will be just recorded. I would say just check our website, the conference website, and we'll be posting interviews that we're doing throughout the month of October there.
I'm going to put that website in the chat right now, just so people can see it if they want to. There's that. And thank you all for coming. The exhibit is in the gallery until November 14th. Just to remind everyone, there are other locations on campus and lots of places you can see. And I encourage you to come, pick up a map, pick up a little reception bag, because we have little individual receptions that you can take with you on your journey. And then, shoot me an email or post something on social media to tell us what you think and what you saw. And Meghan, thank you so much again for being here. We really enjoyed time with you.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Meghan. It's been an awesome week. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you too.
we appreciate you.
Appreciate everybody. Yeah. Well, everyone have a wonderful night, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
Very good. All right. Good night.
Good night.